Max began to return and look for Katie. He began to think, is this really what I guessed? Although, maybe not it. I met this troll just a few days ago. Finally, Mike found Katie. She was still in the store where he left her. Katie is here. Are you still here? Come on, it's time for us to go back. Let's go too, said Mike. Katie was leaving the building. They walked through different floors and were silent. The mother had one hand in her pocket and was carrying a black suitcase in the other hand. Mike asked Katie, "What?" Mike answered, "I want to ask you one question, but I ask you to answer me truthfully." Katie said, "Okay, no problem, ask." Mike answered, "Tell. You really haven't committed any crimes, have you? Have you ever done personal data laundering before?" Katie asked Mike. Mike thought very hard. At this moment, he did not know what to answer Katie. "Katie, do I look like any of these?" Mike asked. "I don't know. I considered both of these options." Katie said, "Although there is more, either you lived an absolutely innocent life, or have never been involved in serious incidents. I think you're quite ordinary." Katie said, "Mike, can you answer one question for me?" "Let's talk," Mike said. "Speaking of which, you're not women, right? Just tell me the truth." Mike couldn't stand the pressure and turned to Katie. "What are you saying?" "Are you crazy?" said Mike. "You're just hiding a lot from me. Are you sure you're not a woman? Just tell me the truth, answer me. If you have seriously changed your gender, then this goes beyond all boundaries." Katie said, "Katie? Yeah. What are you even talking about? I don't understand you. Which gender, which woman? I didn't change anything." Mike answered. They wanted to leave this center, but there were a lot of guards at the door. The red carpet was shot at the entrance. The guards were talking to each other on walkie-talkies and headphones. One guard in the middle was shouting, "Delta Brigade, stand by. Alpha Brigade, be ready." All the guards were very tense. Mike understood that he was meeting some very important guest. One guard continued to talk into the microphone into the earpiece. "Everyone is afraid at the ready. The chairman will appear shortly." Mike did not understand what was happening and which chairman he was talking about. Soon an old man appeared on the red carpet. In appearance he was many years old. They supported him on the left and right so that he would not fall. They helped him walk and move around. There were a lot of guards around. 2 employees of the center came out to meet the old man. "Welcome to the chairman," they said and bowed. "Good afternoon," the chairman replied. Mike just stood there with one hand in his pocket, and the other, he was holding his black suitcase. Katie, for some reason, also bowed to this chairman. Mike did not yet understand what was happening and who this person was. Suddenly, the chairman abruptly jumped out of his seat and ran towards Mike with quick steps. All the guards were shocked. They did not understand what was happening to this old man. Where did he get so much strength to run down this red carpet on this red carpet? Mike was shocked too. What's happening?" he said out loud. "Mike." Mike remained in his place and waited to see how events would develop further. The chairman practically reached Mike. He stumbled and fell very loudly, falling with his arms outstretched. Mike and Katie jumped back in fear and surprise. All the guards ran up and stood around the chairman lying on the floor. They were shocked by such a run. Until recently, the chairman could barely move on his feet, but now he was running, jumping up like a young man. "Hey, what have you done to our chairman?" the guards shouted. The chairman rose to his feet. He extended his hand towards the guards and shouted loudly, "Stop!" All the guards stopped and closed their mouths. The chairman knelt in front of Mike. He moved his hands to the side and asked, "You, Mr. Mike?" the chairman asked. "Yes," I answered Mike. Kneeling, the chairman smiled. His eyes shone with happiness and joy. He looked at Mike and said, "Sister, I knew it," said Katie. "What kind of sister am I to you?" Mike objected. Actions are transferred to the security department. A respectable woman in glasses, a jacket, and a red blouse was sitting at the table. "I think I asked you not to call me when I'm at work, or you forgot," the woman said in a dissatisfied voice. It was Larissa Andreevna, head of real estate security at Jenkinson. Little fairies were flying around in the office. Her race is fairy, a little girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. The ears were sharp, like those of elves. Well, the little fairy sat down and crossed her legs. "To begin with, I want something very tasty and sweet for my information, like a cocktail. And then, I'll tell you everything, the little fairy said. The little fairy sat and drank a cocktail through a straw. I was very tasty, so she even closed her eyes with happiness. Everything is quite... Come on, tell me quickly, I'm tired of waiting. Why did you come to me so suddenly? Larissa asked. The little fairy sat and blew bubbles from a straw. Finally, the little fairy began to talk. I found traces of someone. Someone broke into the B-39 storage facility. Danilovich, which is located on Mount Buchan, the little fairy said. Larissa began to scream very loudly. What kind of idiots would enter the territory of the Elder Dragon? Apparently they are very confident in themselves. That's why it's quite dangerous. Larissa continued talking. If they did this while the chairman was away from the ground, will they definitely start working soon? Larissa continued talking. I will inform the chairman urgently. In the meantime, increase security near the storage facility, Larissa said to the little fairy. I don't think that will be enough, said the fairy. But we have someone who we can always turn to for help, Larissa said. This man was Mike. Everyone had hopes for him. Little sister spoke out. Little sister? Why sis? Katie kept asking. Oh, sorry. I'm just used to calling the teacher that, the chairman said. The guys constantly called each other sisters. True, this was 30 or 40 years ago. Yes, it was too long ago as I understand it, the chairman said. Long time no see, Teacher Mansick. Very politely, Mike said to the chairman. How are you? How are you, and how is your health? Mike asked. The chairman was very happy. The guards ran up to the chairman to help him up. How cool it turns out. Do you remember me, Mike? The chairman said. But I just run a small alchemy shop. Mike, are you still studying magic? Warned by the chairman. I quit teaching and now just worked in the immigration office. Mike answered, Oh my God, it's impossible to believe. Teacher Mike is now an agent, the chairman said. A man who wouldn't hurt a fly is now doing such cruel work, the chairman said. So, you're an agent from the Bureau? Do you accept private orders or only from legal entities? The chairman's daughter asked. Daughter? Are you saying something like that? The chairman said. The daughter leaned closer to her father. She was confused and confused. But Dad, understand, I just wanted... At that second, the chairman did not let me speak and interrupted his daughter. That's enough. Stopping you, he said. Don't poke your nose in. The chairman got up and left. The daughter followed her father. There were taps all over the center. It seems I had some unfinished business on the third floor, the chairman said. Let's get started, let's work. Customized from everyone else. Mike and Katie got into their car and drove across the city. At one of the intersections, they stopped at a red traffic light. Mike began to talk. This is the first modern Korean educational institution, Gosung School. Katie continued to ask everything that interested her from Mike. So, does that mean you worked as a teacher together with this man, C? Yes, Katie was like that. Mike answered. Katie was driving and was simply shocked. How interesting, Mike. You lived the life of a teacher during the day, and at night, secretly catching illegal immigrants. Yes, a book should be written about you. A teacher by day and a threat of illegal immigrants at night. For example, this name, or something like that. Katie spoke, I'm not a hero. I'm sure the government doesn't want to remember his past. It's clear that you don't want to talk about your past, since it is such a past that the government itself does not want to remember it. Katya said, Let's look at the road, Katie, said Mike. A hero who defended the earth from dangerous criminals. And you are not so simple, said Katie. There is one truth that neither Katie nor anyone else knows. The truth is that the land has already been taken. Mike thought to himself, some people say that darkness has swallowed the earth, appeared because of the dragons. This version is very plausible, because dragons could destroy everything. But the ones who actually control the earth, controlling these dragons like chess pieces, is the Committee. The Committee is a secret organization that controls this planet from behind the scenes. 24th October, 1945. This is the creation of the UN. This day was the first when humans and aliens did not come into contact. That's right, the committee waited a long time to create a UN for Earthlings. They continued talking in the car, and then the committee turned to the inhabitants of the Earth. They wanted to accept a large number of aliens from other dimensions. Katie continued talking. To accommodate such a large number of immigrants, they reconfigured the concentration of mana on the Earth. I read about this in a book once. Katie said, thanks to the reconfiguration of the concentration of mana, very capable individuals began to be born among people. Using magic and controlling spirits, they were able to advance the Earth or something. It's interesting to promote this, Mike said. They must have left out the bad parts in the books and not written about it. Mike thought. Their red car stopped. We've already arrived, said Katie. They arrived at their office. Katie and Mike got out of the car and walked towards the door, on the street in a wheelchair, and they were met by an old elf. It was the owner of his bookstore. The first target of group immigration was the Alphas. People invited elves for their appearance and knowledge of magic. This was the main selection criterion. Mike continued up the stairs to his office, but the path along which they moved to the ground, to be honest, was used not only for its intended purpose. Mike continued to talk. Criminals from other dimensions began to use this distant planet Earth as a refuge, or they just thought it was a new gold mine and just started coming here. Mike walked to the door and began to open it into his office. Katie, you can call it a day. Or do you still have some things to do? Mike asked. Katie was shocked by so much new information. It turns out she knows very little, Mike. To be honest, I want to listen to more of your interesting stories over tea. I understand you, Katie. Okay, go grab a cup and come. My office doors are open, said Mike. Mike went into his office to open his computer and read the message he had received. Katie came and sat and drank tea. Well, I listened carefully to the story that Mike told. You really won't tell me anything else? Katie asked. No. Finish your drink quickly and leave, Mike said. Katie left. Mike walked around his office thinking and reflecting. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Who asked, Mike? Today I no longer accept and do not expect anyone. The door opened and a tall young guy stood on the threshold. Long time no see, Mike, he said. It was an agent of the earthly dimension of the American branch. His name was Bradley. Katie brought tea for everyone into the office. They sat down on the sofa. Nice to meet you. My name is Katie, she said. May I know the reason for your visit? The working day is already over. We do not accept, Katie said. The three of them sat on the sofas at the table and drank tea. Katie, don't worry. I just worked with him a long time ago. That's all, said Mike. Oh, so that's what it's all about? Katie answered. Bradley was in a good mood. Mike, you are so callous. I'm not even talking about all the others. But at least once in your life you can call me Bradley, Bradley said. I mean, this girl didn't call you. Which? Mike asked. She never contacted you. Bradley was surprised. Who are you even talking about? Mike asked. What do you mean, who am I talking about, Dell? Her name is Dell. Bradley continued to tell. Mike became sad, took a cup of tea in his hands and lowered his eyes. No, unfortunately, no one called me. She didn't even call. In general, why did she suddenly have to call me? Said Mike. Katie didn't like this girl talk. She began to worry and worry. Mike, is there something wrong with you? Who is this? Katie asked. It's just that she used to be my wife, Mike said. Evening came and it was already too late to stay at work. Our heroes went to a bar that was located on a nearby street. You could spend time there even until the morning. There was good drinking and music playing. Mike and Bradley walked up to the bar. They looked at the bottles with which they stood on the shelves, and they began to place an order for the bartender. Double gin tonic, please. And me too, they told the bartender. It was an unusual bar. Behind the bar, the bartender looked like a real tree. With his branch, he took a bottle from the shelf and began to pour it for the men. The tree bartender was mixing drinks. They had never seen anything like this before. It was a little wild, but it was new. They sat with their mouths open and watched as the tree poured water into their glasses. When the cocktail was ready, the tree handed the glass forward. Instead of a hand, the glass was clamped by a tree branch. It was very exotic. tree, bartender. It's simply amazing. Very happy, Bradley said. So, I'm having a toast, Bradley shouted loudly. Let's drink a glass to Mother Nature, Bradley said. He raised his glass and began to drink. As soon as Bradley drank, he immediately screamed like crazy. Part of the drink, he managed to jump onto the floor. How my throat burns, Bradley shouted. What kind of swill did you give us? He asked the bartender loudly. Doesn't this remind you of our old days? Said Mike. Do you remember the previous dimension where you and I worked together? I remember, just remember, Mike said and smiled. Bradley felt a little sick. Yes? It's true that all the alcohol there is like that, Bradley said. So strong that it is impossible to distinguish real alcohol from burnt alcohol. Bradley continued. Since you've already drunk, you can start, said Mike. Mike did a little of his signature magic. A slight blue mist was drifting through this bar. He made a soundproof barrier. Mike began to think and reason again. Mike Fogg. What is an agent from America doing in Korea? For him, it was still a mystery. Bradley, why are you here? Bradley. Mike continued to think and ask questions to himself. A large plate with various fruits was placed on the table. Mike reached out to grab some fruit to snack on. What are you doing here? Accompanying the princess, Mike asked. Yes? That's exactly it. You always knew how to guess quickly, Bradley said. This Princess Vermi is from the Galanko dimension. I think this was broadcast on the radio a couple of days ago. Mike remembered. That today Princess Vermi will honor our dimension with her presence. The first country where she will stop will be Korea. Mike remembered. Please tell me your secret, friend. Why is the American Bureau even involved in escorting the diplomatic party arriving in Korea? Mike asked. Probably worried that their local security guards won't cope, Bradley said. Rumor has it that they turned to the Earth Immigration Bureau for help. Therefore, the reason why the Korean government turned to America for help. More indi when. Is that the number of escorts requested? It was so huge that the entire Korean branch was missing. Bradley continued talking. And then there is the rumor that this is to pave the way for Group 8 immigration. Mike was very surprised. 8th group, Mike asked. But so many 40 years have passed with the witch, said Mike. Wait, but the rise of Princess Vermi's race, on average about 4 meters. So the 8th group immigration probably won't happen. They are even taller than trolls. The men continued to sit at the bar and talk. Even if we take into account the height of earthly buildings, it will still be difficult to implement. That is why there are rumors that the committee is preparing intensively. Isn't it interesting? Bradley said. Yes, but I would be interested in hearing something a little different. About that girl Dell, said Mike. When we completed our mission with you, we were sent to Earth, and Dell was sent alone somewhere. Her payout amount is about 500,000. I don't know where she found that amount. She was released a couple of days ago. Since she was released, I thought she would be looking for you. She was released. I can't believe she's already given away 500,000 Delants. Maybe she made it big there and got out on parole. Just what heights? Did you ask for Mike? How's Talesia? Mike asked. Wait, Bradley. What kind of work comes out? No, so Dell has already regained her memories? Mike asked. Mike was a little upset, and Bradley began to calm him down. Why stop? Bradley spoke and patted Mike on the back with his hand. You're worried about her because she's your ex-wife, right? Bradley asked. You liked her so much that you immediately got married. How could? I have known that this would happen. She was absolutely normal for the first 80 years. Mike leaned back on the bar stool and threw his head back. She loved me so much that she wanted to kill me. Told you, Mike. All she said was that this was the only way to liberation. If she had killed a prisoner like I did, she would have been sentenced to death. I will never forget what she told me when we parted in the past dimensions. She said, wait for me, and I will come to you soon, said Mike. Mike, let's think logically. Calm down. Just think. She could have simply died, like Talesia died. Mike stood up from his chair and walked out from behind the bar. Bradley, my friend, it's too late. Let's go home to sleep, said Mike. Bradley agreed and they left the bar. Bradley and Mike walked slightly drunk through the dark streets of the city. Mike walked in front and Bradley walked behind. Speaking of Telesia, Bradley continued talking. I wanted to tell you, friend, that you definitely won't end up like her. Just like Telesia. Bradley stopped and began to scratch the back of his head with his hand. Mike turned towards Bradley. Thank you, friend. Supported. Okay, it's all right. See you. Let's see you. Goodbye, said Mike. After that, Mike walked alone towards his house. The house was already very close. Mike, as always, had his hands in his pockets. He walked and reasoned. Mike was already approaching his house. It was late at night. However, the phrase Bradley said could not get out of his head. I wanted to tell you, friend, that you definitely won't end up like her. Just like Telesia. What did he mean? Was wondering Mike. Mike took a can of beer and sat down on his favorite couch. He sat down to think and reason. This was his hobby. He liked this job because it helped him in his work. Mike walked around the room from corner to corner. He constantly thought and repeated the phrase, "You will never become like Telesia." Her ability lay in exceptional administrative skill and politics. She gained control of the committee. A few days later, another ship with immigrants arrived on Earth. There was a lot of talk about this event on television and radio. Those damn immigrants again. Wherever you spit, there are only migrants all around. People were indignant. Soon there will be no normal people left at all. People stood and looked at the ship that brought immigrants. Some wondered why they were constantly being brought in. And some simply did not understand who they had brought, why they had brought them. People didn't really like it. Hansen himself. People screamed very loudly. Someone in a crowd of people recognized him. He wore glasses that were so big his eyes were very big in surprise. All the people went out into the street, stood, and looked at the sky. They didn't understand what was happening because a bright light flash appeared in the sky. Everyone was waiting for what was going to happen or how it would end. It was already very late, almost night. People have never seen such a starry sky. The whole sky was dotted with stars. After the flash, smoke appeared in the sky. It was painted different colors. It was like the northern lights. At this time, events are developing in Larissa's office. A little fairy flies next to her. They are preparing for a teleconference. They will have a meeting with Jackson. So let's start, Larissa said. Jenkinson sat on the other side of the screen. So, let's now talk about the treasure of Area B39. In Bukan-san, did we lose everything there? The criminal left no traces and he cannot be tracked even with the help of a fairy. That's right, I'm asking you. Yes, that's the chairman, Larissa answered. Larissa. Chairman Jenkinson began to pace around the room. He was nervous. Don't you understand why I personally came to the committee headquarters? And I've been racking my brains over all this for several days now. I came here for only one reason, because of the materials that were stored in this warehouse. This is a very big loss for us. This is a big blow to me and my company. Do you even understand this? Larissa and the little fairy stood and listened to the chairman. Chairman Jenkinson was very upset. He looked very tired, but from anger his eyes began to fill with a red light. They just glowed in the dark. Larissa Andreevna was very angry with the fairy. She began to make big claims against her. She began to resort to personal insults. Do you know how much money I spend on you? Larissa Andreevna asked. How much? Answered the little fairy. 10 billion. Jenkinson joined. And I didn't consider it a big expense until now. You believe that you can boast of your knowledge in the field of spirit research. Elves do not trust creatures beyond the line, which they themselves drew. But I still hoped that you would be taller and better than your relatives. However, even in such a situation, I did not bother with elven methods, even if he is considered my most useful ally. Jenkinson said harshly, I may not know the motives of the criminals, but I am sure of one thing. They are all trying to leave the Earth as soon as possible. Therefore, I will inform the committee about this immediately, so that they close all spatial exits on Earth. Campbell, contact them. Tell me that I agree to any conditions. Make a note of this to yourself. As soon as we finish the dialogue, contact him immediately. Chairman Jenkins said, It will be done, Larissa answered. Chairman Jenkinson sat down. In fact, mentally, he was very tired. He sat thinking and constantly sighed deeply. Typing is a pain in the ass. Chairman Jenkinson said, I didn't want to burden him even more. said Mike. Mike sat and played board games. He was in a good mood. What is road control? Who even came up with such nonsense? Mike asked very indignantly. You guys are out of luck. You have total control from all sides. Everyone is looking out for you. Even if Princess Vermi is strong, why control all of Seoul? Told you, Mike. It hid the details of the princess's movements to make it difficult to track. Have you finished your beer? I've already finished mine. I'll go get some more. If you want, I can take it for you too. While leaving the apartment, Inspector Johnny noticed strange smoke. This smoke resembled dark magic, but for some reason it smelled of very tasty food. This is what stopped the inspector. At this time, Katie was frying food in a talking, magic frying pan. The food was a little burnt, which is why all this smoke was coming from the kitchen throughout the apartment. What is she cooking there? The inspector thought. Is it even possible to fry anything in a magic talking frying pan? Johnny didn't understand this. Police Inspector Johnny returned home. Mike, let Katie keep this frying pan. It seems to me that it will never be washed off. Inspector Johnny laughed. Enough chatting. Let's get on with our game, said Mike. At that moment, his phone rang. Who can take such a decisive moment? Mike asked and looked at the phone. What does she need at a time like this? Police Inspector Johnny began to ask who it was. Who? This is a good-for-nothing elf who got himself into something again. Michael was explained that he should appear near the Gray Mountains as quickly as possible. So, Mike and Larissa Valentinovna stood near the large gate on which was written B39. These were the same warehouses. The door to the warehouse was slightly open. Unfortunately, I didn't see anything myself. A little fairy was flying near Mike. Even a fairy who can communicate directly with the spirit world is unable to find clues. Mike said indignantly, "So we have no way out of the situation at all?" asked the little fairy. Mike approached Larissa to chat. "What have you already tried? Have you tried anything else besides talking to spirits?" Mike was interested. Larissa Valentinovna began to answer. "Not much time has passed since the fire was extinguished, so I didn't have time to do much. But I called one person with psychometric abilities." True. This didn't help either. Mike stood attentively, looking at the large doors of this warehouse. Residual thoughts can be easily erased with magic, Mike said confidently, especially with such large-scale spells. Looking at it is a protective barrier. It seems that the spirits could not even come close to this place. They would simply be carried away by these spells. The surviving animals ran away, and there was no one left around. Well, what about animals that are already dead? Mike had a lot of questions, but didn't have answers yet. He took his magic knife in his hand. Mike, as always, held the knife in his palm. He ran the blade hard across his arm and cut it. Mike began to use his dark magic. Instantly, everything around him turned black and red. From his palm, blood flowed and spread in the wind. A very strong wind began to blow. The wind became very hot. Everything seemed to be heating up. Larissa Valentinovna was practically blown away by the wind. "What it is? I don't understand." Larissa Valentinovna screamed loudly. A strong clatter of hooves was heard in the forest. Soon a large, beautiful deer stood in front of them. He had simply gorgeous horns on his head. The horns glowed red and pink. Larissa Valentinovna and Mike stood looking at the deer. "What it is? I don't understand anything. Please explain," Larissa asked loudly. "This is the spirit, to whom the souls that died in suffering conveyed their pain and resentment. Even if magic is involved here, sweeping away the remnants of thoughts and even souls in its path, they will always remember the moment of their death." At this time in the city, it was a nice, warm, calm evening in the city. The sun was still shining. Small clouds floated across the sky. The action takes place in a tattoo parlor. How I missed those times when only the human race was called people. The tattoo artist was tattooing a design on an orc. The orc constantly screamed he was in pain. "You can be more careful." I asked you to be more careful." The orc client shouted. "We've already had enough of it with our tolerance. Who will fight for our rights?" "To human ones," the master thought to himself. The client was constantly grumbling and complaining that he was in pain. The org client was very dissatisfied. He was angry. "Damn it, it still hurts." But no one stuffs anything anymore. He came for the sake of a unique sketch. I also paid some money. Yes, for such pain, they should do it for free. The orc was indignant. When the orc left, he said a few more ugly, insulting words to the master. Hey, master, God forbid I get blood poisoning. All responsibility will be on you. Just know that, the orc said. Yes, of course we agreed. The master smiled and said, only now you can't drink, smoke, or go to the sauna for a week. And most importantly, apply the ointment that I gave you. The tattoo artist's name was Do Yongsuk. It's crazy how many prohibitions there are. The orc client continued to be indignant. I myself would try for a week without drinking, smoking, or washing. Simply inhuman conditions. The orc was indignant. Dirty Animal thought the tattoo artist. At this time, near the police station, something began to happen. Cars began to arrive, police officers one after another. A very large number of green goblins were detained. One of them was on his knees, holding his palms together in front of him, and simply begged him to let them go and forgive him. One policeman waved his baton in the goblin's face. He threatened him with violence. Come on, get up and quickly. Go to the bus, I told you. The policeman shouted loudly. Sorry, the goblin answered. Oh, you green creature, get up quickly, I told you. The policeman yelled even louder and swung his baton violently. A police inspector approached the young policeman, put his hand on his shoulder, and stopped him. What are you doing? Asked the police inspector. Oh, Inspector, you misunderstood. The young policeman made excuses. I also heard that goblins are like young children, said the young policeman. That's enough, said the inspector. They began to talk quietly so that no one would hear. Never say anything like that again. Remember this once and for all, Police Inspector Johnny said. The inspector fed the goblin, and the young policeman realized that it was not so scary. Suddenly the phone rang about Policeman Johnny. It was Mike. It's strange, he's never called before, thought the police inspector. Mike spoke. Remember, among all the violators we had one with a tattoo. Yes, but I'm not talking about him now. I'm talking about his tattoo, Mike said to the inspector. You can find out from him where he stuffed them. Yes, of course, without problems, Johnny said. Mike was reviewing some documents. So that's it, said Mike. This tattoo inscription turns out to be in one very ancient language. Translated means... Suddenly Mike fell silent. Police Inspector Johnny also fell silent. He understood that the task was not easy to find out the tattoo parlor in which this tattoo was filled. But he really wanted to help Mike. In general, the police inspector was serious. That same nice, warm evening. The action again takes place in a tattoo parlor. There was not a single person on the street. It was very quiet and calm. The tattoo artist was sitting in a chair and just relaxing. Today is an important day, he said. Maybe we should close the salon early today. There are no more clients anyway. And hardly anyone will come, the tattoo artist said. The tattoo master came out and began to lock and chain his workshop, his tattoo salon. The area was troubled. Therefore, it was necessary to close the interior securely. This is a long chain, metal, which was used to wrap the handles and then a large barn lock. The tattoo artist was indignant. The old crows again turned up the entire trash can. Those crows ruined his mood. There was trash lying around. Immigrants from other spaces only take away the jobs of our citizens. Remember that immigration policy is designed to support for the mastery of slavery as an important economic factor. And, of course, remember that those who decided to move to us, somewhere far away, have a home. But land is all that people have, and if we lose it, we simply will have nowhere to return. There were too many of these harmful, dirty birds. They sat on the wires and shit down on the road and on the cars. They fought in the air and flew straight to the ground. Indeed, feathers very often fell straight from the sky, like snow, or like fallen leaves from trees in autumn. Mike caught one of these feathers. He held it in his hand and looked at it. Large black and gray crows circled right around Mike. They weren't afraid of him at all. Some flew up to him and landed directly on his shoulder, like old friends and acquaintances. The master then returned home. Something was constantly being said in his headphones. He always listened to it. With quick steps, he moved home, tired and irritated. And while we have more and more allies, we can fight this propaganda. For now, the greatest threat to us comes from two races. Absolutely right. These are dragons and orcs. At this time, near the doors of a large hotel, Bradley stood there with a small woman. I look forward to our cooperation during your stay at the hotel, the little woman said. This is a translation. My name is Olga. I am a translator. I'm very glad to meet you, she said. So, Olga is a translator, a dwarf woman. Bradley was very pleased with himself. It had been a long time since he had seen or met gnomes on his way. And here is a dwarf woman, Bradley thought. Follow me, Agent Bradley, said the dwarf woman Olga. The two of them walked along the long, beautiful corridors of this luxurious hotel. Bradley asked, Tell me, how is Princess Vermi feeling? To be honest, the princess is very worried right now. I think you are aware of the important negotiations between the Korean Committee and the Kingdom of Galanko regarding the level of security, right? Olga spoke. Olga continued talking. We are very pleased to be able to appoint such a professional as you, Agent Bradley, as head of security. But she still believes that security is insufficient, Bradley said. The main thing is not to think badly of her, Olga said. They approached a large brown door. I'm afraid I have to leave you here, Olga said. The princess is in this room. Come in, but first you need to knock. Bradley started knocking on the door. The answer was simply silence. He knocked again and again. There was silence behind the door. Then Bradley knocked again and simply opened the door. Bradley went into the hotel room. He saw in the distance near the window some kind of lump of white sheets and towels. It seemed as if someone had gotten out of the shower and was simply admiring nature through the window. Then Bradley noticed a green tail, like a crocodile's, lying on the floor. Let me in. Let me in, Bradley said. The answer was also quiet. But at that moment, this huge crocodile's eyes were already burning with yellow fire. It was clear that the crocodile was unhappy with the uninvited guests. Very suddenly, the crocodile jumped out from around the corner of the room. The crocodile opened its mouth very wide and began to scream. He made incomprehensible and very disgusting sounds. Saliva sprayed in all directions from his mouth. Mucus dripped from my mouth straight onto the floor. Then, in all its glory and full height, the makeup artists appeared to be one healthy crocodile. Drool flowed and dripped onto the floor from his mouth. It was Princess Vermi. Rasa is a joker. Olga and Bradley stood covered in spit. This is her expressing her joy at meeting you. Olga spoke and apologized. She looks forward to working together for a long time and fruitfully. Olga continued, Okay, I understand. Reassure her that I agree. She has nothing to worry about. Night has come. It was quite quiet. There was not a single star in the sky. The action takes place in one of the small houses on the outskirts of the city, by Yongsuk. Nim, your check is almost complete. If you successfully complete it, you will immediately become one of the members of society. Great, that's good news. But before that, I would like to tell you something. This is important information and should be listened to carefully. The tattoo artist took the photo in his hands and began to examine it. He already understood a little what was going on. These were photographs of the same type. There were orcs on them, with his work and his tattoos on them. Yes, we will talk about those tattoos that you gave to the orcs. What's the problem? The tattoo artist asked. These are inscriptions in an ancient language, right? They literally mean the following: slave, genitals, shit, animal. Yes, indeed, it is. And, as I understand it, the orcs don't even know about it. In the dimensional past, they were treated like slaves, and the level of illiteracy among them it was equal to 99%. This may make it difficult for me to join a fraternity, the tattoo artist asked. I'll be honest with you. To be honest, I had suspicions that we might get caught. Or an even worse scenario. Or perhaps someone will find out about this as easily as I found out. However, everyone eventually agreed that it was quite funny. And now, about the main thing. These are serious things that you have to do. There is simply no other way. Please don't leave any more evidence, and your salon will have to close. Don't worry. Open it in another place after a while. This room looked like some kind of warehouse. There were 2 sofas and a table between them. They sat on them and talked. We will help you with all the necessary equipment. Trust us, and don't worry. Okay, I understand, thank you. The man's face was not visible. He covered it with a dark cloth. He was dressed in a gray jacket with a hood. It was either the main man of the Brotherhood or one of them. Then let's get started, he said. It's time to go through the stage of joining the fraternity. The tattoo artist had been waiting for this for a long time. He was ready for anything that could happen to him. He was here, and therefore he was already happy. His face was completely beaming with happiness. Yes, I'm ready. Let's go, the master said. First, a huge rat appeared. It was gray. Her eyes glowed purple. Her paws were so powerful, it seemed like she was just working out in the gym. And then, different drawings began to glow on the wall. They were pink. These were various pictograms and a 6-pointed star. It was a hexagram. It is a star with 6 corners, which is formed from 2 equilateral triangles superimposed on each other. The tattoo artist was more focused than ever. His glasses reflected everything he saw. Everything around was dark, but due to the burning fire, it seemed that the whole room was illuminated. One of the fraternities approached the tattoo artist and handed him a knife. I hope you understand what needs to be done. The man asked this. In the center of this room was a cross on which an orc was crucified. They offered to kill him and sacrifice him. The tattoo artist hesitantly took the knife in his hands. People from this brotherhood shouted at him, "Let's show your anger and let justice prevail." They shouted, "I can think, master. It's like killing a rooster. Orcs are not people. They themselves almost killed me several times. Everyone will be better off without them." The master continued to think. He was attuned to what he was asked to do. "Let's get together. Don't delay this." These people shouted to him. Org lay tied to a wooden cross. They gagged him so he wouldn't scream. Tears flowed from his eyes in a stream. He was not guilty of anything to be treated so cruelly. The tattoo artist was holding a knife with both hands. He swung it very hard. The knife was already behind his head. He wanted to thrust it straight into the orc's heart with all his might. Just pay them back in kind. People from the Brotherhood shouted and supported him. And so, he began to strike. The tattoo artist closed his eyes so as not to see all this. The hands were already above the orc's body. Suddenly, something hit his hands. The master opened his eyes and saw that he had no hands. "What can't this be?" the tattoo master shouted. He looked at his hands. His hands had been cut off. Blood oozed from them. He immediately turned pale. It was the biggest pain shock in the world. Then the tattoo artist looked at the floor. It was on the floor that his severed hands lay. He screamed very loudly from shock and from the pain he was now feeling. Fraternity men who wore gray robes, they didn't understand what happened. They didn't understand who did it and how. Who did it? Did anyone see what happened? They asked each other. I didn't even notice a single crack in the protective field. I don't know who this is, but I can say for sure with complete confidence that these are definitely high-ranking wizards. Hey, since you were able to track us down and destroy our defenses, it seems like you know too much, said one of this fraternity. I think you understand perfectly well what can happen to you if you decide to joke with us. It was quite dark near the entrance doors to the room. The light from the fire did not reach there. A tall man appeared at the entrance. At the moment, his face was not yet visible. And what did the man say? So, what will happen then? Continue. I'm interested in the whole list of what you can do with me. It was clear from his voice that he was not afraid at all. He's very confident, and his eyes glowed red. At this time, the action takes place with Mike and Larissa. They are still in the forest near the mountains where the warehouses are located. I'm only doing what a press secretary should do. I understand you perfectly, Agent. That's why I ask. Now you can't trust anyone. His subordinates are still alive. Mike thought. It seems Jackinson has lost his touch. Even dragons have no control over time. Don't you know what kind of people they are? Even the elders couldn't cope. Do you want me to take them on? said Mike. No, I just wanted to ask you to find their traces. I hope you can do this before the chairman returns to Earth, Larissa answered. And when does he return? Mike asked. About a week later, Larissa responded. Agent's spatial terminal may be closed for today, but we can't let them get rid of the evidence in the meantime. So very interesting. What happens when the terminal is blocked? Mike asked. But I haven't heard anything about it. Very strange. Mine continued to think and reflect. Maxim listened and began to agree. I understood you, but you must understand me that this will not be easy, Mike said to Larissa. Larissa was very happy. Her happiness knew no bounds. The little fairy flying nearby was also happy and smiling. They achieved their goal. Mike agreed. I'm sure you're aware, but I'm demanding compensation, said Mike. Of course, Larissa said. I'll prepare everything for you. She was holding a brown box in her hands. Larissa Valentinovna opened this box and showed what was inside. Inside was a blank check with a signature. This is a blank check. You can use it for both Earth currency and dalents. And, It is already signed, Larissa said. Mayak looked at Larissa Valentina in surprise. Then he looked at the box containing the signed check. It was a tempting offer, but in all his 800 years, he had never received one like this. This is a blank check for me, and it's already signed. Mike asked, does Jenkinson really trust me that much? Thought and reflected, Mike. At this time, Larissa and her little fairy assistant were very happy. Did it really work? They spoke to each other. They were very happy that everything was going according to their plan. I can't use this. I'll contact you as soon as I find something, Mike said, and left. I don't know who's in charge, but this guy caught my attention. Well, I'll visit him and try to find out something. He must have some information, said Mike. All the people from the Brotherhood stood and watched carefully. They only asked one question. Who is this? They had never seen him before, and they didn't understand what was happening. The more I find out here, the more zeros I can write on my blank check. Mike thought. His eyes began to fill with red light. Mike stuck out his hand. Red smoke and fog began to fly out of it throughout the room. It was clear that Mike began to work and turned on his dark magic. He saw how one orc had already been sentenced to death. He lay practically exhausted, groaning. His arms and legs were tied. His mouth was tied with a rag so that he could not be heard yelling. There were burning candles around this green orc. Everything was prepared for the ritual of sacrifice. Mike clenched his fist very tightly and slashed his arm. As his blood flowed out, his power became stronger. After this, the blood turned into a red stream of smoke and scattered throughout the room. The poor exhausted orc lay and looked at everything that was happening around him. This simple orc had never seen anything like this in his life. He ended up here purely by chance. He was simply caught on the street. Mike was his only hope for salvation. Mike approached this orc. He picked him up from the floor and sat him down. The entire fraternity stood and looked at Mike. They were very scared. The orc was very pleased that he was saved. He just didn't know the name of his savior and who he was. Mike looked at this green orc and said, "Now you are free. You can go. Do not be afraid of anything." The organization quickly gathered. I got dressed and ran away from this hell. What kind of spell was this? I don't understand how this is even possible. Someone from the crowd shouted, "T-shirt, brother." The man who stood in the middle shouted to everyone, "Calm down." People from the Brotherhood began to communicate with each other and talk. It seems he is a master of everything that concerns magic. Others said we couldn't defeat him even if we attacked him all at once. One man from the Brotherhood party began to say, "T-shirt, I'll tell you this. Without many words, you will still regret that you crossed our path," said this man. We secretly received a magical shield from the witch community. Now with its help, we can reflect any spell back to the attacker. A crowd of fraternity men began to advance on Mike. Now, no matter what spell he casts, he himself will suffer. The man from the Brotherhood said, and suddenly above his head disappeared and blood began to flow upward in a powerful fountain. It was Mike's dark magic that began to work. The crowd of frat people stopped abruptly. One of them was missing a head. Everything was covered in blood. Those standing nearby were also splattered with blood. One of them said, "Brother, what happened?" although it was already clear that the head was no longer there. Microsoft was casting his dark magic throughout the room. He radiated fire. "Remember, one mouth will be enough to get the information you need," Mike said loudly. Mike began to destroy these people one by one. There was a lot of blood around. He simply used his magic to rip their heads off. Those who were still alive stood in one place and did not move. They were completely confused and terrified. Mike continued to take revenge on them for their bad deed. No one had the right to make sacrifices with orcs. "This is punishable by law," said Mike. He was able to break the witch's defense. The men shouted at each other. "If he's not a dragon, then we can definitely defeat him, right, guys? Friends? Could it be that he is actually a dragon?" They started asking if they were with each other. Everything around Mike was on fire. He stood confidently on his feet. His eyes glowed red. He was ready to take revenge. And at this time, interesting events also took place in the hotel where the princess was resting. The princess consumes 20 kilograms of raw meat at one time, 6 times a day, Olga said. "Please, please, please, let the security chief check that the food is not poisoned. Please, do not forget that you will be staying at the hotel for a few days to rest from the trip." It was a very large living room. In the middle, she was sitting on the sofa. The princess had a table nearby. Fresh meat lay on the table, and Bradley and Olga stood near the door and looked at the whole thing. "Princess and something else," Olga said. "Once a day, when the princess lays eggs, no one should be near her. There should not be a soul within at least a 10-meter radius. At this point, the princess is emotionally unstable. Keep that in mind. This usually happens around 8 o'clock in the morning." "Yes?" Bradley asked. "And one more thing. Due to the difference in time zones, this may all happen irregularly. In other words, it is a sacred ritual for the production of the precious metal gold." "Did you understand?" Olga asked. "Yes, I understood everything." "I'll be careful," Bradley said. "Black magic is much more powerful when the caster feeds it with his own pain. I'm going to get out no matter the cost. The most powerful black magic still remains the very offering in its original form. Brother, I'll buy you some time. Transform myself and do it like this." This demon's head looked like the head of a large lizard. Huge teeth in 2 rows closed in the paste. An elongated nose and deep eyes that burned with red fire. Tongues of flame appeared from its mouth. Years of life in exchange for salvation. A curse made of my flesh and blood. I understood you. "Well, if that's the case, then it's your own fault," said Mike. Mike turned on his black magic to the fullest. In a split second, a volcano began to erupt from one of the men's heads. Flames of fire protruded from his severed head. "No, brother. That's not what one and the pillars cried out. It was already too late. We will avenge you. Don't worry, brother." Other people from the crowd were shouting. "I don't understand what's happening. It's simply impossible." One man spoke. "Damn it. How did you do it? This is beyond magic," he shouted. In fact, it was a terrible sight when the heads were torn off and fiery lava erupted from this place like a volcano. Max stood very calmly and confidently. Red smoke came from his hand. "But he was going to breathe fire anyway," Mike said. "And I just cursed it to make it more flammable. That's all. It's very simple, but I see you don't understand it," said Mike. One of this community was very indignant and shouted, "You're just crazy. You are a crazy maniac. You're a butcher," he shouted. But brother still bought me time." The man continued to scream. Mike spread his fingers on his palm and touched them to those pictograms and the 6-pointed star that was drawn. It still glowed pink and purple. I completed my last spell. "You must know about him, since you call yourself a magician." One of the community shouted loudly. He was too confident in himself. "This is a monster that absorbs everything, material and spiritual." "How do you like that?" he asked. A large head of a monster with teeth and light eyes appeared throughout the room. It shimmered from black to light purple. It was a shadow monster. One of the people in this community looked at Mike. He looked very frightened. There was pure fear in the eyes. "Unless, of course, you are a real dragon," he said. "Eh? I hope so." There was red and white light all around. It was like a glow. The temperature was heating up, so it seemed that everything would actually burn and turn into real ashes. There were flames all around. We stood very confidently around him. The fire was blazing and sparks were flying near his body. It went. "I'm glad it finally dawned on you," Mike said. "Now it's time to talk." Everything calmed down and went out. He defeated everyone with his magic. It was all over quickly. He took this guy who screamed the most, and he sat him down opposite him. "Well, you finally woke up," Mike said. Mike sat on the couch opposite him. He had a lot of questions to ask this guy. "So, it's time to talk. I'm tired of waiting for you to wake up." "Why is the Oslo school principal against the Human Rights Alliance?" Mike asked. "Oslo. This is the master of the Oslo school, and the Black Poppy is notorious." "I think you've confused me with him," said Mike. "Well, everyone has the right to make mistakes." Mike put his finger forward, and a happiness bug flew out of his fingers. The guy, of course, immediately inhaled it through his nose. The bug began to spread throughout his body, penetrating directly into the brain. This guy was shaking all over. Then he became very ticklish. Then he became very ill. He tried to blow the bug back out with his nose. After some time, he succeeded. The bug actually flew out of his nose. "Heck, even the lucky bug doesn't work," said Mike. "And you are stronger than members of society. Don't waste your time and just kill me," the man shouted. "I may not be as strong as you, but I'm still a dark magician too. You must understand that even under torture, I will never speak." Mike was really angry now. He put his hands on his belt and spoke loudly. "So that's what you decided, right? Then I have only one thing left to do: torture you so that you finally speak," Mike said loudly. "Although it would be easier to stick a worm in your brain and let him die in peace." "Told you, Mike. Can you bluff as much as you want?" The man answered him. Nock held his sharp magic knife in his hands. He looked at this man. "I recently met a dragon," Mike said. "Our 1,000-year-old gentleman was trying to escape to another dimension. Of course he was followed. But he died. Because he was just one day late. That's why I considered him the most pitiful creature in the world," said Mike. "Why are you telling me all this? I don't understand where the logic is," the man asked in fear. "In fact, the logic here is very simple," said Mike. "It seems to me that now you will take this title from him." This man's face became very frightened. Many wrinkles appeared on the face. Mike brought his purple knife right up to the man's face, close, very close. What is this facial expression? Mike thought. The knife almost touched the bridge of the nose. The pupils became very large from fear. The eyes filled with tears. Tears immediately flowed down my cheeks. "And you will regret that you were born." Then Mike caught a taxi, got into it, and went about his business. He took out his phone and started calling. These were business calls. "Hello, this is Agent Mike. Remember me?" Mike spoke on the phone. "Unfortunately, I was unable to obtain any information about that incident in the B-39 storage facility. Due to the specifics of the organization, I cannot know the details of operations in which I am not involved." May continued driving his yellow taxi along the large, busy highway. However, today has brought its fruits. The Human Rights Society is going to throw something up today. I don't know if it will be a murder or a kidnapping, but their exact next target is the princess. She hired so many security guards for a reason. She feels danger and is afraid. And if it's worth something, it means it knows something. To prevent the 8th mass immigration, their important people will also take part in this. Among them, there will clearly be a vault thief. Agent got you. Ask. But can I ask you? Can I ask you something else? What? Mike answered. Okay, no problem asking, said Mike. Mike continued to think and reason. It seems to me that their request is becoming more and more common. Well then, I'll just start charging for my work and for my answers. And if I don't have enough money, I'll just borrow it from someone. Mike arrived at a large, beautiful hotel. There he was already met by a mustachioed woman. This is Olga, dwarf. Hello, you are Agent Mike. My name is Olga. I am a translator. Operations. I was surprised that the Immigration Bureau suddenly cut down the security personnel. They say you are the highest paid agent in the Korean Immigration Office. The princess is also completely satisfied. There was a knock on the room. Princess, this is Olga. A new member of the security team has arrived. Olga opened the door. They entered the room. The princess and Bradley were sitting on the sofas. Bradley was very surprised to see him. He was a little confused. There was panic in the eyes. He stopped from his chair and asked loudly, "Mike, what are you doing here?" Mike stood with his hands in his pockets. He slowly looked from left to right and assessed the situation. Then he simply said, "Hello," slowly, quietly, monotonously. "Hello, my name is Agent Mike." "Nice to meet you." The princess raised her head and looked at Mike. Saliva dripped from her large green crocodile jaw. The princess looked at Mike very carefully. There was a short pause and no one understood what was happening. It seemed that the princess had stopped breathing. "What's happening?" Mike thought. This crocodile, that is, the princess, began to feel embarrassed. Her cheeks turned red like a girl's from embarrassment and the awkward situation. The drool from the jaw began to flow even more. There was a specific smell in the air. Mike sniffed. He began to recognize this smell. He discreetly covered his nose with one finger. What is this pheromone? Mike thought. The princess stood in the middle of the room near the table. She was very excited. She looked like a girl who had been asked out for the first time. She actually had a strange smell coming from her. Mike felt that he could even hear the sound of his rapid heartbeat. The room was indeed completely filled with a pheromone with a pungent odor. The princess looked very pleased. She simply devoured Agent Mike with her eyes. This was noticeable to everyone. The pheromone turned the air around her pink. She looked at Mike and smiled. It was the smile of a happy princess. Mike stood and looked at the crocodile. He understood that this healthy big crocodile covered in drool was the same princess who hired a lot of guards. He understood that the princess most likely fell in love with him at first sight. Are you kidding? Mike thought to himself.